Vigil, Ante, and the Vigilante Antics by BelleAmant. Read by Oakshadow 5. Chapter 41. The Hero Killer. Tanya is going to die. Tanya is going to die, and it will be all his fault. Tanya is going to die, and then Pro-Hero Native will die, and it is all because Tanya was too focused on vengeance. Tanya is going to die, and he's going to die in shame. What a pity, the hero killer says, but his voice holds no remorse as he lifts up his blade. You could have become a good one, kid, but you focus too much on what matters to you, and not what matters to the whole of the people, and that, in the end, is your downfall. Tanya wishes that he could move, that he could lunge out of the way of the glinting weapon that is about to be plunged down into him, but he can't. He's frozen where he lays on the ground, and not just with fear. A paralyzing quirk, Tanya thinks, and he worries that will be his final thought when he dies, that his final noise will be a cry of pain, and all Tanya can think of is Tensei. Tensei. Tensei as the villain swings his blade down, and a clanging noise rings through the air, echoing in the alley. Tanya opens his eyes. He's greeted with the sight of Stain, knocked halfway down the alley, and a familiar green-covered bag in front of him. Midoriya. Can you move, Ida? Midoriya asks, and a lack of honorifics in a time like this shouldn't shock him, but somehow it makes him want to flinch. Or perhaps it's the cold tone that Midoriya speaks with. No, Tanya chokes out. It's his quirk. Don't let him cut you. Midoriya nods, shifting. A hand reaches behind him, pulling something out of his belt. It's a phone. Who are you, boy? Stain asks, and Tanya wants to choke when he sees how the man eyes his friend, judging him, trying to decide if he's worth letting live or not. It's disgusting. It's all his fault. Analyst, Midoriya responds, voice still cold. Dangerous. Now, I'm going to politely ask you to step away and let me take these two out of here. Do you really think that will work? Stain asks. If so, you are more foolish than most heroes these days. It never hurts to try asking, Midoriya says coolly, and Tanya watches how the bell clicks his phone a few times. If Tanya is correct, he thinks a message was just sent. He can't tell. His glasses were knocked off when he got hit by the hero killer. But if that's how it has to be, I just fight for them. Really? Stain asks, and a sliver of something Tanya doesn't want to recognize slips into his voice. You risk your life for them, for these fakes? They're not fakes, Midoriya snarls, and then he's pulling out a staff. And I'm always ready to risk my life for others, Stendhal? The name doesn't mean anything to Tanya, but it seems to strike something within Stain, who straightens up and actually lowers his weapon as he studies Midoriya. How do you know that name, analyst? You can't be more than a child. Age means nothing in this equation, Midoriya retorts, and Stain chuckles an odd, low sound. I suppose not. A pity, but this must be done. And then Stain lunges at Midoriya, and Tanya wants to scream. But he doesn't, because Midoriya is stronger than him, is better than him, and is able to dodge the first swipe of Stain's sword, and the second, and the third. And on the fourth, he blocks it with his own staff. On the fifth, he actually manages to push Stain back an inch. On the sixth, Midoriya throws a flash grenade, which Tanya barely closes his eyes in time to avoid being blinded temporarily, and then he uses his staff to swing himself into a kick, knocking Stain right across the jaw. Stain laughs at the hit, even though his jaw cracked from the impact. On the seventh, Stain lands a hit. It lands on Midoriya's mouthguard though, so all it does is knock Midoriya backwards. On the eighth, a second flash grenade is thrown. It's not Midoriya who throws it though. You know, I thought we were partners, analyst. A familiar dry voice calls out, and Tanya tears up as Shinzo comes into view. You were too slow, ventriloquist. Midoriya responds, voice half teasing, as if he isn't fighting for his life. And then the boy dodges the 9th, 10th, and 11th slashes without hesitation. It's like instinct, Tanya thinks, but there's no explanation for why. 12, 13, 14. On the 15th attempt, Shinzo calls out, Are you so scared of analysts that you can't even try fighting me? And Stain gains the eeriest grin that Tanya has ever seen, and laughs again. I knew you seemed familiar, Stain cries out, And isn't that a terrifying thing for a serial killer to proclaim? When I stopped hearing reports, I assumed I'd captured you. It's such a shame that I have to fight you, Vigil, Ante. You could always stand down and let us arrest you, Midoriya offers, as if this entire conversation makes sense, as if any of this makes sense. While you may be the closest thing to a hero that I've seen since All Might, I'm afraid that I simply cannot lose sight of my goal. I'm sure that you understand, Vigil. I absolutely do not, Midoriya retorts, and then he lunges forward once more. And on the 16th swipe, Midoriya gets hit. And then Midoriya is crumbling to the ground. A scream rips through the air, and it takes Tenya a moment to realize that he is the one shouting out. A flash of white cloth reminds Tenya that Shinzo is there too, and suddenly Shinzo is jumping into the fight while Tenya can't even move a single finger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slashes in a row, all expertly avoided. Please, stop! Tenya cries, as Shinzo lunges and dodges and weaves around the killer, taking his own staff and trying to hit the villain. Please! I've already caused Midoriya to get hurt. I can't see the same happen to you. This was my fight. 12, 13, 14. Shinzo takes a single second to rip his eyes away from the fight, and Tenya wants to recoil from the intensity in the boy's eyes. Every time that Tenya has seen Shinzo, the boy has always had the most passive expressions. But now, Shinzo looks feral, eyes alight and teeth bared in a gruesome snarl. Then stand up and fight! Shinzo shouts, and then he's cut down and paralyzed as well. And it's all Tenya's fault. You didn't last long, Auntie. Stain reproaches, as if disappointed in Shinzo. But that's to be expected, isn't it? After all, you were never the one to risk your life, were you? No, that was Vigil's job, being a true hero. Don't talk shit about ventriloquist! Midoriya hisses, and Stain laughs. Always ready to defend another, aren't you? Sadly, you are in no place to do so right now. Stain lifts up his sword, then swings it at Shinzo. A burst of flame intercepts the weapon, and Stain leaps out of the way. Midoriya! Todoroki calls out, and Tenya wants to cry, because now he's brought another friend to an early death. Your directions were awful. Be more precise in the future, please. Can I exactly see my phone? Midoriya mutters. Don't let him lick your blood. He paralyzes you. I see, Todoroki says, and then forms a barrier of ice when a dagger is thrown his way. I alerted the pro-heroes. They should arrive soon. Thanks, Midoriya mutters, and the fight continues, blurring before Tenya's eyes. 1 second, Stain is across the alley. The next, he's lunging at Todoroki, only to be knocked back by another round of fire. When Stain tries to approach again, Midoriya leaps into action, throwing himself onto Stain and ripping the man's katana out of his hand, throwing it across the alley. He's knocked off of the man's back in an instant, but Midoriya is quick and rolls out of the way without hesitation. It's a blur of red and black and green, and Tenya is just watching, helpless as his friends fight for their lives, and he can't do anything. Just like he couldn't do anything for Tensei. Please, Tenya chokes out, and tears run down his face as he pleads with them. Please, just go. Grab Shinzo and save yourselves. This is my fight, not yours. You shouldn't suffer for my decisions. Just shut up. Todoroki snaps, just as he shoots another wave of ice out at the villain. You're making a fool out of yourself. This isn't just your fight anymore. And if Native is here, I'm guessing it never was. But my brother wouldn't want you here, Midoriya screams, throwing a grenade at Stain. Tensei Ida is hurt, but he is not dead. But if he did not arrive in time, you would be. Your brother wouldn't be happy to hear that you got murdered in the back of an alley because you let your ego get in the way, would he? Midoriya doesn't wait for a response, whipping out his capture weapon and snatching away one of Stain's knives in the process. At the same time, Shinzo manages to break out of the paralysis and activates his own gear, snatching another knife just as Stain tries to throw it. No, so get up and fight! And it might be a coincidence, or it might be through pure willpower, but Tenya finds it in himself to stand and lunge, just as Stain tries to stab Todoroki in the chest. He gets a knife to the arm, but it's better than a dead classmate. Now that's what I'm talking about! Midoriya cheers, but his eyes are narrowed and his jaw set. Let's get the show on the road, folks! And so, they do exactly that. The next few minutes speed by in a rush of adrenaline and fear, with all 4 heroes in training dodging and trying to land their own attacks. Until, in a perfectly timed moment, Tenya lands a Recypro burst to Stain's side just as Midoriya hits him in the head, and Stain crumples to the floor. He's unconscious. Rope, Midoriya mutters, and Shinzo hands over some rope right away. The two get to work, tying the man up and yanking knives off of his person, as if it's second nature. Vigil, Ante. Maybe it is. Tenya feels sick, and the knife digging into his arm is painful, but he forces himself into action. He helps Native up, who is just now regaining mobility, and Todoroki helps Midoriya and Shinzo as they drag Stain out of the alley. The pros arrive, and they look confused and bewildered, and a little bit terrified by the sight of 4 teenagers and a pro hero pulling the hero killer along. But Tenya, quite frankly, can't care less. His focus is waning, and he's just relieved that his friends are alright. And then, they're not. Well, Midoriya isn't. 1 second, everything seems to be going well. Then, a Nomu flies down and Midoriya pushes Shinzo out of the way, and suddenly, Midoriya is being ripped away from the ground and into the air. Tenya thinks he hears Shinzo screaming, but all he can do is stare in fear as Todoroki tries to stop the Nomu, but it's already out of reach, and Endeavor can't hit it with his flames. And then Stain is leaping up and stabbing the Nomu, and he's falling and holding Midoriya for the approaching crowd to see. And then Stain shouts, "All of these heroes before me, and yet only a villain went to save this kid. They work for nothing but fame and money, but never save the ones who count. So, try your hand at defeating me, and see where you end up. I will not let anyone defeat me, except for a true hero, All Might. Or this boy before me." And then, Stain falls silent, and Midoriya stumbles onto his feet before looking over and saying, "He's unconscious." And then, Midoriya drops to the floor, and the world resumes. And Tenya feels nothing but guilt. We got the Stain fight! And he recognized Midoriya and Shinzo as Vigilante Antics. That was so crazy! But anyways, guys, I hope you all enjoyed chapter 41 of Vigil, Ante and the Vigilante Antics, and I see you all next time. Bye!